at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. Welcome to your official economic review this fresh week, Monday, your 21st. Now, aspirants seeking elective posts in the general elections could vie without being holders of a degree if a bill proposed by Senator Kipchumba Murkomen is passed. In the proposed Elections Amendment Act of 2021, Senator Murkomen wants the requirement for aspirants to have a degree replaced with, and I quote, able to read and write in English or Kiswahili language, and literate in Kenyan Sign Language in the case of those with hearing impairment. According to Murkomen, the requirement of a degree for an elective post is discriminative against people who do not hold such qualifications. This proposal coming just days after IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati announced the law requiring aspirants for the 6 elective positions to be degree holders will take effect next year. Implementation of the amendment section 22 of the Election Act was postponed in the 2017 elections to allow candidates seeking to run for parliamentary and MCA positions to acquire the required academic qualifications. All right, just before we get into that, let me introduce the panel that we have for you this morning. We are joined in the studio by Philip Mwangale, a leadership and governance consultant. Philip, how are you doing, sir?
I'm okay.
Happy to have you around. All right, let's cross over online. We are joined by ARNOLD who is a microfinance banker and economic analyst. ARNOLD, good morning, sir.
Morning, good morning to you.
Happy to have you around. Lastly, we're joined by GABRIEL MWENDWA, who is the investment associate of Horizon Africa Capital. Good morning, Gabriel.
Good morning, Simba. Pleasure to have you here.
Let's cross over into the studio then and talk about that. Philip, that you don't need a degree. And this is just coming, what? A year to the general election is when they realized, we need to amend that. But when it was proposed, a lot of them were okay with it. They said, yeah, let's give them 5 years to go back to school, study, so that anybody wanting to go for that elective post would then say, well, I'm now qualified. But they realized that it's just 1 year and some of them will not have those degrees now. So all of a sudden, take it out.
First, thank you for having me. The amendment or the proposed amendment by Senator Murkomen is ill-informed. In this age and time where we are talking about a country, Kenya is ranked top in terms of academic outcomes or education outcomes across the continent. Yes. In such a time, we should not be talking about the very basic education standard being the qualification for leadership in this country. Yes. The Election Act 2012, the original act before it was amended, provided that for you to qualify for election as an MCA or a member of parliament, you only had to have a post-secondary school education. And thereafter it was amended to what we have right now, where you must have a university degree. Yes. Now, this points us to one thing: how seriously we take the task of leadership. I've had arguments over the last 2 weeks of people saying, there are those who are illiterate, those who have not gone to school, and yet they can be very good leaders. But in an age and time where we are moving, where the world is, the world is advancing. We are now almost 22 years after free primary education. We are now almost 10 years after we enacted the Basic Education Act Act, which and our basic education is high school education.
Yes.
So to require that those who are to lead us, to require that those who are to oversight, the executive, for example, those who are to oversight county governments should have, university education is really not something that we should be arguing about. And number two, one of the things that is very important actually to note here is that a degree holder, there is a presumption that a degree holder has acquired the content of a university education. And I've been the proponent of the fact that we need to have a difference between schooling and education, because we have a group of people in this country who are well schooled but not well educated. So the argument that you'd have people who have not gone to school being very good leaders, and people who have actually gone through school. And that for me is the distinction, that we have people who have gone through school, people who have gone through university and acquired a certificate, yet do not have the contents of the education that they should have acquired there. I've also had people argue that, the people who are robbing this country, stealing us dry or looting this country dry are educated people. And that is a moot discussion for me, because we would rather have people who have an advancement in cognitive ability and then judge them from that level, rather than have people who have no understanding. And yes, we have exceptions of individuals who, who are just have good intellect, yes. But then to expose these people to very dire matters, matters such as budgeting, matters such as legislation, we need to have people who have been exposed to knowledge, and knowledge that is sufficient for them to engage in matters of leadership at that level, at the level of the county assembly and at the level of parliament. So for me, we should not be having this discussion. Those who are advancing the amendment, I've heard the deputy president also make some of those sentiments. It's a populist argument. Yes. Deep down, they know what we really need, but because they want to appeal to a large number of the population, because I think we have less than 2.5 million degree holders in this country, which is a discussion we should be having. Why are we not having people advancing to those levels, yes, even after we have made such advancements in education?
Pretty much. And I'm going to ask you this just before we cross over to the next issue that we have this morning, and bring in Gabriel and Arnold as well to weigh in on that. I mean, when you look at the timeliness of this specific amendment that they actually want to push into Section 22, what is it? What do you read into that, Philip?
I mean, we have individuals who are already serving in the current parliament and
Yes.
in our county assemblies who have not met that qualification. So one, there are those who want to maintain job security, so that when they are vying in 2022,
Yes.
they just meet the very basic,
Yes.
and that is perhaps high school education. We have even people who do not have that very minimum in terms of basic education. And two, we also have individuals again who have no desire to gain knowledge. They were satisfied with primary school education, or even not advancing towards that level, and they would still want to get the trappings of power, yes, in the coming election. So we have those two categories of people, and that is why I insist it's a populist argument. It's a populist amendment to the Elections Act.
Yes.
If it were up to me, I think I would propose this, that for the level of county assemblies, which we could have retained what we had in the Election Act 2012 before it was amended, and insist on post-secondary school education. But then the challenge with that is that you would have people getting into these nondescript colleges somewhere 2 months, and you have a certificate, and then you tell people you have post-secondary school education.
Yes.
So the question we should be asking ourselves is, why isn't our education achieving what it should achieve?
Yes.
Such that we have leaders who claim to have gone through university and have a university education, not people who have just gone through school, or people who are well schooled. And we should also be asking the question, why our education is not, inculcating the values that we should be having people getting out of schools with. That is the question we should be asking.
Pretty much. All right, now let's move on to the next issue that we have for you this morning, and it's touching on SRC freezing increments of salaries for civil servants. And they're also saying that there's not going to be job evaluation for the next 2 financial years. Good. Let's get into that then. Now, public servants are staring at tougher days after the Salaries and Remuneration Commission said it has frozen salary reviews, citing hard economic times occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Commission Chair Lane Mengi says there will be no salary increments for public servants and state officers for the next 2 years to allow the economy to stabilize. SRC further announced that no additional funding will be availed for the implementation of job evaluation results in the next 2 financial years. In a statement, the Commission said the decision was arrived at following recommendations by the National Treasury. The Commission says it will review the situation after 2 financial years and give direction for the remaining period of the 3rd remuneration and benefits review cycle. Good. Gabriel, okay, let me begin from there. That for the next 2 financial years, that there will be no promotions, there will be no job reviews. All of those who belong to the civil servants docket will earn as they are earning now. Is this a bold move from SRC? Is this what they should have done a long time ago?
I would say it's, I wouldn't attribute it to SRC in the first place.
Yes.
I think we all know this is coming from, the terms we've executed with the IMF. We're on a program now. So these are some of the things that are obviously expected from that program. Now, whether it's something that should have been done a long time ago, I don't think the biggest worry was the salaries and wages. I think those ones were really at par to a certain extent. The biggest concern has always been the additional perks. If you look at, allowances and all those other things that are added on top, those have always been the greater concern. And it's been clearly highlighted, even by the SRC itself, that all those other allowances are where they cannot control the wage bill. Because, someone with another additional 11 allowances, then how are you going to even control the wage bill? But anyway, I think even through COVID, we're now almost a year and a half into it, a year, 3 months, call it. The civil service was not affected. They closed offices, but they went home. Their pay was not cut in any way. No government employee lost any job. So I think it's just a reality check that you guys do exist in this economy as well. Whether if it's going bad, it's also going to be bad for you.
Yes.
It's not only about the private sector where you hear about job cuts. You're in government, you can stay home, the office is closed 3 months, you can go and leave another 2-3 months, and you're still taking a pay. It's hurting those who are actually financing that. So I think it's long overdue that we wake up the civil service that we are actually in this economy as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I sit on that one.
Pretty much. And we're coming back to you on that, Gabriel, because you're mentioning something very important, that, it's not about the wage bill that is a problem. It's about the sparks and then additional allowances that come on top of what the civil servants take home. Let me bring in Arnold. Arnold, do you share the same sentiment that, that should be the case then? If the economy is bleeding, then the civil service should also feel the hit.
Thank you so much. I think just to echo what Gabriel has mentioned, our arrangement with the IMF was bound to have us execute austerity measures, and it's definitely going to affect the civil service.
Yes.
And then just to mention something very important, I think if you look at our government budget and recurrent expenditure, the consolidated fund, you see a lot of cost going on recurrent expenses, which are the wages and other related allowances. There was a report which came in last year amidst COVID-19 that the government had saved in excess of 2 billion Kenya shillings because guys were not traveling, because COVID-19 had affected the entire planet. So guys could not travel. So the usual per diems and other related allowances which guys normally enjoy had to be frozen. And when a quick audit was done, we realized that the country had actually saved a ton of money. So I think it's as Gabriel has put it, it's simply a reality check. It's something which we may need to observe as a government. And if you look at how the economy, how funding the economy has been structured, it looks like it's a prudent move to make.
Pretty much. Philip, the powers of SRC, and I've questioned, and I'm not going to ask you this because I've questioned this from time to time. Do you feel that SRC should be given more powers to actually bring a wage bill down? Because even as Gabriel says that, well, we are there, it's just the sparks, the additional perks and allowances that actually push us out. They need to bring it back to 33%. That's what they've said. But if you look at it where it is right now, towards a GDP, it's at 52%. They still need to bring it down, but what we have from them is promises that we haven't seen them fulfilled. Do you feel like they should be given more power? Because in most instances, Philip, they would recommend, and that can be undone by Parliament. Parliament has more power than SRC.
I think the SRC now has, in terms of their practical performance, they are now a salaries recommendation commission. But what they should be doing is what they are constitutionally mandated to do.
Yes.
But that said, I think one of the things that we must watch out for when you're talking about the wage bill, and it's good that my colleagues have mentioned this, that we have allowances that are through the roof.
Yes.
I think Kenya is the only country, at least on this continent, that whose civil servants enjoy, mini vacations funded by the taxpayer across the year, because you have, aside from those allowances, you have workshops, you have retreats to exotic places. You walk into these parastatals, into these government institutions, and you have people who enjoy largesse.
Yes.
Yes, they are civil servants, but people are out on workshops almost on a weekly basis, and you have per diems, and it is something that people look forward to. They don't even look forward to serving, they look forward to the per diems that come with the workshops and retreats and whatnot.
Yes.
So in my view, I think the SRC should have come out strongly. Even though they would have been recommending, they should have come out very strongly in terms of reducing our the allowances.
Yes.
I was just looking at the Kipra report on how these allowances have shot up in the last couple of years, and we are looking at about 240. I think this was the Auditor General's report. 247 allowances that the civil service has added on itself. That is up from less than 100.
Yes.
So if you have that kind of scenario, then this measure, this austerity measure that the civil service is going to face in this coming 2 years is not really enough,
yes,
in my view, because it just reduces the wage bill by about 3%, if I'm not wrong. So that is very little in the larger scheme of things. We should be looking at a radical shift in terms of how our wage bill, features,
yes,
in our budget. And the wage bill has an overarching effect on the pension bill. There is also an amount that goes towards pension. So the higher the salaries, the higher the pension bill.
Yes.
So these are things that we must be radical about. It's unfortunate that we are waiting for policy to come from without the country,
yes,
because this is an IMF measure. It's it's sort of we are being culled
yes,
we are being controlled,
yes,
so that we are able to meet our debt obligations. But if this policy was coming from within us, we had a government that was very keen on deflating the wage bill, then we would have very radical measures, including Parliament,
yes,
because in my view, I think Parliament contributes to a large percentage our bloated wage bill. So we must have a radical shift. We should not just wait for the IMF and other debtors to come and now then police us to a certain direction.
Pretty much. All right, now Gabriel, let's talk about that as well, and quickly, if you can, because we only have 5 minutes just before we take a short break this morning. Gabriel, I mean, are we intimating that this could be because of the IMF deal that we brokered the other day? It could be that now we are actually taking proper steps that we should have taken some time way back when we got into the COVID-19 pandemic. How attached is this to the IMF deal that we just brokered the other day?
It is quite attached.
Yes.
Because you can imagine we're going into an election year.
Yes.
Simply put, no government would risk this 1 year to, about a year and a half to elections. No government would risk this. So I put it squarely to the IMF bill.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is because even in the year of COVID, they did not, very few civil servants were affected.
Yes.
In terms of even stopping the pay increases. I mean, we saw them rushing to, continue travels and trainings at the tail end of the budget period, just ended June. So, yeah, I mean, this is thankfully by the IMF. It's the only one that has the authority to just put its foot down, and the government has to listen.
Pretty much. Arnold, in that as well, we've seen suggestions that the government is only going to hire in those key sectors of the economy, that they only have to do priority hiring, and the only thing that we saw in the budget was the hiring of extra teachers, that is in 2021 and 2022. Is that an indication that this is just what IMF wants?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, for the next maybe 24 months, the government is essentially cash strapped. So tie that with what the IMF is requesting us to do in terms of the austerity measures in place, it's definitely what we're going to be seeing probably the next 1 or 2 years.
Yes.
Before any other adjustments are done.
Pretty much. All right, Philip, clear for us this conversation before we take on that short break. Does it mean, therefore, that now, because if our IMF is forcing us to get into that we have to give more powers to SRC? Because we've seen in the past where SRC makes a recommendation and the parliament has to approve that recommendation, and where money is involved, you will normally see that the National House has its way, because it's the one that deals with any issue that touches on money in this country. Yes.
I think the SRC should have been given more powers, yes. But even with what they have,
yes.
I think they have underperformed, at least this new regime that has been led by Mengich. We saw the Serem Commission very strict, yes. And they really put their foot down in terms of following through their recommendations, even up to Parliament. So I think aside from the scientific considerations that the SRC would come up with, yes. Match all cadres of the civil service and then determine that this should be the considered pay, I think we must also now start looking at those political considerations, because Parliament is largely political, and political in the sense that the considerations there are sometimes out of the confines of reason. So the SRC must also move beyond the scientific and then also implore Parliament from the political angle.
Yes.
We must also have the goodwill from the executive, because if the executive is not keen on reducing the wage bill, then SRC has very little to do in terms of having their say or sway within Parliament. So we must really have goodwill from the executive, and in this sense we must also have an executive that is keen on turning the economy around.
Yes.
If we do not have that, then we would be really putting too much weight on the SRC.
Pretty much. All right, we take a short break here on a business, and once we come back, we'll stick with Gabriel and Arnold as we look into issues, economy, and more specifically, if you look at exactly what we did last week, we do know that the western counties of the country have been put under a new curfew measure, and also movement into and out of that has been reduced to just the essential movement. How critical are they to the contribution of the country's GDP, and if indeed then we're imposing those measures on these counties, what chances do we have of the economy rebounding to what the government is saying? They say more than 8%. Should we go back and revise those numbers? And more conversations as well. If it's not going to be that 8%, then is this budget that we're going to run under 2021 or 2022, does it also need to be relooked into so that we have some sort of a supplementary budget even before we start rolling out the 2021-2022 document once we come here on a Business AM at Metropole TVKE across all the social media platforms? I am at Kiagesimba. Keep tweeting, keep talking. We'll talk back to you as well. Good morning.